Hi there, everybody. Let's try again. Welcome to Tea Tuesday, and this is an open collab. This is hosted by Life of Patti and Kathy's Favorite Things. I'll put their link down below. It's all lowercase. You join in for Tea Tuesday. It can be hot tea, cold tea, or a beverage of your choice. That's right, a beverage of your choice. And while you're doing that, having tea, you can just chat, you can color, you can do diamond painting, whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. And today for a beverage, I've got sugar-free tea right here. Yummy. It is so good. So get ready. It's hello, Mr. Twiddle time. Going for another chapter. This here is Mr. Twiddle and the dog. Oh, Mr. Twiddle. I hope he doesn't think it's a skunk or something. You know, with him, you never know. Kind of like me, you never know, huh? It says, Mr. Twiddle and the dog. Once Mrs. Twiddle looked after a friend's dog for a week. It was a nice little dog called Scamp. It was most obedient, always wiped its paw on the mat when it came indoors and said "Ruff, ruff" for its food. Really, I'm quite sorry to part with a dog, said Mrs. Twiddle, patting it. Twiddle, will you take it back for me, please? My friend, Mrs. Grubbin, would like to have it this morning. Certainly, my dear, certainly, said Mr. Twiddle. Shall I go now? There's a bus I can catch in about 10-minute time. Yes, get your hat and go along, said Mrs. Twiddle. She gave the dog a biscuit, brushed his coat well, and fastened the lead to his collar. Dear, dear, she said, feeling the collar. You must have grown fatter this week. Scamp, your collar is too tight for your neck. I'll loosen it. She undid the collar and slipped the buckle along to another hole. The dog liked the collar loose. I knew it. He could slip it off then. It licked Mrs. Twiddle's hands. Dear little thing, said Mrs. Twiddle. Now, Twiddle hurried along or you'll miss that bus. Twiddle looked for his hat and put it on, and then looking at his watch, he found that he only had 5 minutes. He's not going to make it in 5 minutes. You know that, I know that. He took hold of the lead and shot off down the garden path with the dog trotting after him. When he got to the gate, Mr. Twiddle found that he had forgotten to put his glasses on. He had cleaned them and left them on the table. Brother. Well, never mind. I shan't really need them, said Mr. Twiddle, hurrying along. I shall miss the bus if I don't walk fast. Now, very soon the dog met a friend. This friend was a beautiful little Pekingese, and Scamp thought she was marvelous. Pekingese wagged her feathery tail and Scamp wagged his. Stopped a minute and talk to me, said the Pekingese. So Scamp did a kind of double wiggle, slipped his head nearly out of his loose collar. He wagged his tail at the Pekingese and joyfully licked her nose. He was ready for a jolly good game. The Pekingese looked after Mr. Twiddle in astonishment. Does he mind going without you, she said. I haven't asked him, said Scamp. I say, doesn't my collar look funny running along the road without me on the end of the lead? What will Twiddle say when he sees it? Oh, Mr. Twiddle. With a bound, Scamp ran around the corner and began to have a little fine game with his little friend. Mr. Twiddle didn't even see him go. He trotted along the street, pulling the lead, an empty collar behind him, whistling a little tune and keeping a sharp lookout for the bus at the corner. He met his friend, Mr. Jinks, who stared in astonishment at the sight of Twiddle, hurrying along, pulling a collar behind him. "Where are you going?" he called. "Just taking this dear little dog back." "Its owner," said Twiddle, beaming. "Isn't it a good little soul trotting along behind me so happily?" Mr. Jinks thought that Mr. Twiddle must be a little mad this morning, but there wasn't any time to say so because Twiddle hurried on quickly. Mr. Jinks stared at the collar. Look what Mr. Twiddle's doing. He's pulling a lead with a collar. What happened to Scamp? We're about to find out. Running along behind Mr. Twiddle and began to laugh. Mr. Twiddle got to the corner just at the same time as the bus did. He jumped up, pulled the lead and collar behind him. "Now just under the seat, lie down quietly," said Mr. Twiddle, peering around for Scamp. He couldn't see him, so he thought he must have gone under the seat already. "Good dog," he said to the empty collar there. "Very good dog." "Conductor, I want a ticket for myself and a ticket for my dog." "What dog?" asked the conductor in amazement. "The dog with me, of course," said Mr. Twiddle. "Really, some people do ask silly questions." "Don't you know a dog when you see one?" "Perhaps you thought I had a cat or a canary on the lead." The conductor looked offended. He thought that Mr. Twiddle really wanted to buy a ticket for a dog that wasn't there. He might as well let him, so he gave him a ticket and a dog ticket as well. I didn't know you paid for a dog ticket for a bus. I learn something new all the time. I don't think we do here, but it's been a long time. A very big lady got in with a small dog under her arm. She tried to sit down beside Mr. Twiddle. "Madam, I have a dog under my seat," said Mr. Twiddle. "Perhaps it'd be better if you took the seat over there. Our two dogs might fight." The big lady looked under the seat and saw no dog at all, only an empty collar. She thought it was a trick to make her take another seat and leave Mr. Twiddle comfortably alone in his. So she sat down the opposite to him and glared at him with these big, large black eyes. Mr. Twiddle felt most uncomfortable. "I suppose you think you're very clever," said the big lady in a freezing sort of voice. Mr. Twiddle was astonished. He had never thought of himself clever to begin with, and he couldn't imagine why the big lady should think he did. He felt more and more uncomfortable as he sat under the glare of the big lady's black eyes, and he bent down and spoke to Scamp, whom he still thought was lying quietly under the seat. It was dark under the seat, and Mr. Twiddle hadn't got his glasses, so he couldn't see a thing. He spoke in a quiet voice. "Good dog, Scamp. Very good dog. Lie down quietly now." And there he is with the lady next to him in the seat. Not a sound came from under the seat, which wasn't at all surprising. "You do think you're funny, don't you?" said the big lady in a scornful sort of voice. "Well, madam, no, I can't say that I have ever thought of myself funny," said Twiddle. He got up to go because he couldn't bear to think what a strange big lady would say next. "Come on, Scamp," he said. "Come on. Mind he doesn't bite you," called the big lady after him. Twiddle thought that that was a silly remark. He jumped off the bus, and with his nose well in the air, he hurried along. "Hey, your dog's going to chase a cat," a boy shouted after him. "Silly child," thought Twiddle, pulling the lead behind him. "Thinks he'll make me look behind and see if Scamp really has gone chasing cats. Well, I won't." "Ah, your dog's lost," yelled another boy. "Dear me, I wonder why children are so stupid this morning," thought Twiddle. "Ah, there's Mrs. Gubbin's house. He went up to the path and knocked at the door. Mrs. Gubbins opened it. "Oh, do come in," she said. "I wonder if you'd bring back my darling Scamp today." "Then you wondered, right," said Twiddle, happily pulling the collar behind him in the hall. "I brought him, and he's been as good as gold all the time." He looked around to see Scamp, but the hall was dark and he could see nothing. "He must have gone under the chest there," he said. "Scamp, Scamp, but he didn't come in with you?" Gotta have a drink. Said Gubbins, puzzled. "At least I never saw him. He was just at my heels, Mr. Twiddle. I had him on the lead." He pulled at the lead and the empty collar slid over the floor to Mr. Twiddle's foot. Mr. Twiddle bent down to pat the dog that wasn't there. His hand found the empty collar and he picked it up and blinked at it. "Good gracious," he said. He slipped his collar. "The rascal. Well, I'm sure he's under the chest, Mrs. Gubbins. You call him and see. I must go now, or I'll miss the bus back. Goodbye, Scamp, dear little chap. Goodbye." He trotted off down the path again to the bus, whistling. Mrs. Gubbins looked all about for the dog she couldn't find. Twiddle caught the bus and soon trotted home down the street. "Well," cried Mrs. Twiddle, opening the door to him, "and where have you been all this time? Didn't I tell you to take Scamp back to Mrs. Gubbins for me?" "Well, my dear," I said, Twiddle, in surprise. "He was good as gold all the way, and I left him safely under the chest in the hall at Mrs. Gubbins." "Oh, and I suppose the bus I suppose he caught the bus back and arrived home before you did," said Mrs. Twiddle in a rage. "Scamp, come here." And to Twiddle's enormous acknowledgement, Scamp came rushing out of the kitchen, put his front paws on Twiddle's middle, and tried to reach up and lick him. "But I haven't taken you to the mistress," cried Twiddle, sitting down in alarm. "Wife, there must be two Scamps." "There really must." "Well, it's a good thing they're not two Twiddles," said Mrs. Twiddle with a snort. "Now I shall have to take Scamp home myself, and without a collar lead too. Really, Twiddle?" She looked so fierce that poor Twiddle ran out in the garden shed, sat there the rest of the day. And he still couldn't think how it was he took Scamp home and yet found him waiting for him when he came back. Oh, that Mr. Twiddle. Here's chapter 11, Mr. Twiddle's Spectacles. That's what we'll be reading next week. I want to thank everybody for coming along on Tea Tuesday, and I'll put everything in the description box. And please go on over and check out everybody else's Tea Tuesday. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.